I'm Amber Matthews. I'm 29, a financial analyst based in Portland. And 3 weeks ago, I inherited something no one expected: my grandfather's entire $2 million estate. The day after his funeral, my mother demanded I sign it all over to her. When I refused, she didn't just get angry, she declared war. This morning, I was summoned to a family meeting. I walked into my old home and found my entire family and 2 men in expensive suits. "Meet our lawyers," my mom said, smiling like this was a tea party. I didn't come prepared, but I wasn't walking in blind either. Most kids grow up idolizing superheroes or pop stars. I grew up idolizing a man who smelled like sawdust, swore by handshake deals, and believed character was worth more than cash. Harold Matthews wasn't just my grandfather. He was my moral compass, my anchor, when everything else felt like chaos. He built a chain of hardware stores from the ground up, literally. Started with a single storefront and a second-hand register. I still remember the photo that hung in his office, him arms crossed in front of Matthews' supply paint, still drying on the sign. I used to stare at that picture for hours, not because of the store, but because of the look on his face. Quiet pride, earned, not given. He used to say, "Nothing worth having comes easy, kiddo." And he lived that. Every inch of success was carved out of long hours and longer odds. No shortcuts, no excuses. My mother, Patricia, never understood that. She was his only child, spoiled, entitled, impossible to satisfy. While Grandpa worked 16-hour days, she spent her teen years burning through credit cards and relationships with equal speed. I was barely 6 when I first saw them fight, her screaming about some overdraft charge, him standing there silent, heartbroken. She called him cheap. He called her lost. Neither was wrong. As I grew older, the fractures in our family widened. Patricia floated from one impulse to the next: plastic surgery, luxury getaways, fleeting business ideas that never lasted more than a tax season. Meanwhile, my stepfather, Craig, spineless and smug, enabled every whim with a beer in one hand and a credit line in the other. By the time I was 12, we were drowning in debt. I'd come home from school to collection notices, hushed fights behind bedroom doors, and the brittle silence of people pretending everything was fine. But Grandpa saw me, not just as a child in the storm, but as someone capable of more. While the others ignored the world behind the curtains, I watched it. I watched him, how he spoke to employees, how he negotiated without raising his voice, how he ran numbers late into the night like they were a puzzle only he could solve. Then one day, he invited me in. "Come with me Saturday," he said, tossing me a faded baseball cap with the Matthews logo on it. I was 13, nervous, excited, terrified I'd mess something up. Instead, I found myself thriving. He taught me everything: how to read inventory reports, how to track vendor discrepancies, how to manage payroll with compassion, not just precision. "Your business," he'd say, "tapping a ledger is only as strong as the people who believe in it when you're not around." Those Saturdays became sacred. At school, I was just another kid. At home, a financial liability. But at Matthews Supply, I mattered. I had value. I had purpose. And somewhere along the way, I stopped calling it his business. It became ours. That bond, built over years, not promises, was what Patricia never understood. She thought love came with gifts, money, grand gestures. Grandpa knew better. He gave me time, trust, skills I'd carry even if every dollar vanished tomorrow. So when he looked me in the eyes 2 years before he died and said, "Amber, I've made arrangements," I didn't flinch. I listened, because this man who built everything from nothing was telling me he'd made a choice. Not out of favoritism, not out of spite, but out of clarity. "I failed her somehow," he said one night, coughing between sentences. "Maybe I gave her too much or not enough of what really mattered. But you," he squeezed my hand, "you turned out just right." Those words still echo. And that's why when people ask if I feel guilty for what I inherited, I say this: I didn't just inherit money. I inherited belief. A belief forged through years of shared Saturdays, quiet car rides, handwritten notes slipped into my dorm laundry bag. I inherited a legacy of doing the work, not just cashing the check. And that's something no amount of guilt, rage, or legal threats can take from me. If you'd walked into our house when I was 9, you'd think we were doing just fine. Marble countertops, leather furniture, a wine fridge humming in the corner of a kitchen no one really cooked in. My mother made sure the surface sparkled, but scratch it, and everything underneath was rotting. Our living room looked like a department store exploded. Handbags still wrapped in tissue, shoes never worn, receipts hidden in drawers like secrets. Patricia didn't spend to enjoy. She spent to silence something, fear, shame, maybe even love she didn't know how to ask for. And Craig, my stepfather, played along because he liked the comfort. Or maybe he liked the chaos. It distracted from how little he offered beyond an arm around her and a shrug. They remortgaged the house before I hit middle school. The second time came before high school. I remember the notary's pen scratching on paper while Patricia joked about investing in herself. Craig laughed too loud. I sat at the kitchen island, pretending to do homework, trying to figure out why equity sounded more like a trap than a gift. By contrast, Grandpa's world made sense. When things broke, he fixed them. When numbers didn't add up, he stayed late until they did. His love wasn't loud, but it was present. He'd show up at my school concerts dressed in that same old flannel like it was formal wear. He'd bring coffee to my part-time bookstore job, pretending he needed something to read in the business section. And when the register closed, he'd slip me an envelope of 20s with a wink. "Don't tell your mother," he'd whisper. "This stays between us." It wasn't about the money. It was about knowing someone saw me. He saw how I lingered in his office, running my fingers across yellowed ledgers and old invoices like they were relics. How I asked questions no one else bothered to ask. Why does this supplier charge more? Why did employee hours shift this week? I thought he'd brush me off. Instead, he handed me a calculator. "Figure it out," he said. "I think you've got the eye." By 13, I was spending every Saturday at his main store. Not because I had to, but because it felt like home in a way my actual house never did. There was order there, purpose, respect, and quiet. God, the quiet. No screaming behind closed doors. No threats about turning off the cable if I didn't stop asking about tuition. No panicked whispers about maxed out cards while pretending everything was under control. With Grandpa, there was just work, and coffee, and soft jazz on the back office radio, and the deep satisfaction of solving problems most people didn't even notice. I didn't understand it then, but I was learning what security felt like, not the kind you buy, but the kind you build, and that kind of safety. It doesn't come with a ribbon. It comes with receipts, ledger entries, honest hours logged. I started to believe I could build a life like his. One where love was steady, not stormy. Where trust wasn't conditional. Where money wasn't a curse passed from one generation to the next. It's funny how your clearest memories aren't the birthday parties or holidays, but the quiet things. The click of Grandpa's office door unlocking. The smell of motor oil and printer ink. The weight of his hand on my shoulder when I balanced the monthly accounts correctly for the first time. Those were the memories that mattered. Not the tears I pretended not to hear from my mother's room. Not the icy silences when Craig disappeared for days. Not the empty promises of next month things will be better. No. My real childhood was shaped in back offices and supply closets. In the quiet nods Grandpa gave me when I did something right. In the way he let me fail and trusted I'd figure it out. He wasn't just giving me tasks. He was giving me a future. Even if he knew my mother would try to take it. The day I got my college acceptance letter, I cried in the bookstore bathroom, not because I was overwhelmed, not because I was proud, but because I knew the moment my mother saw that envelope, the countdown would start. The countdown to the next excuse, the next emergency, the next clever way to reroute something meant for me back to her. Grandpa had promised he'd pay for school. He made that clear from the moment I showed him my first straight-A report card. Education, he said, is the one thing they can't repossess. I believed him, I still do. But when I handed over my acceptance letter, Patricia didn't congratulate me. She frowned. "Did you apply for scholarships?" Before I could answer, she was already dialing Grandpa. I listened from the hallway as her voice slipped into that brittle blend of victimhood and control. "Dad, we're struggling with the mortgage again, and Rachel's got that cyst. And Jason needs that learning assessment insurance, won't cover it." She didn't even mention my name. The next day, the tuition money vanished. It wasn't spoken aloud. There was no formal withdrawal, just a sudden shift. "We all have to make sacrifices, Amber." I made mine quietly. I took out loans, picked up more hours at the bookstore, and said nothing when my back ached from shelving boxes past midnight. Grandpa noticed. Of course he did. He came by once a week, always the same ritual, pretending to browse the finance aisle, then slipping me an envelope behind the register, like we were part of some small-town heist. "Don't tell your mother," he'd say, voice low, eyes kind. Inside each envelope was just enough. Enough to cover textbooks, rent, the occasional greasy sandwich when I was too tired to cook. It wasn't about the amount, it was about the gesture, about someone still believing in me even as my own family treated me like an afterthought. He never questioned my silence. He knew I was holding the family fractures together with duct tape and willpower. I think he admired that. I think it broke his heart. The deeper I got into my studies, business administration with a minor in accounting, the more I understood the math of our dysfunction. The pattern of Patricia's pleas, the timing of Craig's bad luck, the way Rachel's illnesses only seemed to strike when money was on the table. It wasn't coincidence. It was a system, a machine built on guilt and entitlement, oiled by Grandpa's generosity and powered by his inability to say no to anyone but me. Because I never asked. Not really. And maybe that's why he gave so much to me when he could. Because I was the only one who saw the cost behind the checkbook, the toll in his eyes after every phone call, the way his hands trembled slightly more after each last time. By the time I hit my final year of college, his health had started to slide. The man who once lifted lumber without flinching now had trouble with stairs. His voice stayed steady, but his body betrayed him. During one hospital visit, he gripped my hand like he was anchoring himself to the earth. "I've watched you, Amber. How you save, how you plan, how you wait. You're the only one in this family who understands money's not just for spending, it's for protecting people." He paused, eyes sharper than I'd seen in months. "I've made arrangements." The room went still. "I don't want to talk about that," I whispered, afraid that saying it aloud would make it real. "You need to," he insisted, his voice cracking like old wood. "They'll come for you. They'll twist everything. But you'll know the truth. Hold the line." I nodded, tears blurring the tile floor. I didn't understand then just how heavy that promise would become. I didn't know how many knives would be hidden in hugs, how many smiles would be sharpened like weapons. I didn't know the cost of being trusted by a dying man more than his own daughter. But I know now. College didn't just give me a degree, it gave me a reason to fight for something better. And the strength to walk away when blood tried to drown me in debt. The first time Grandpa forgot the name of a supplier, I told myself it was just age. The second time, he called me kiddo, then paused like he couldn't remember my name either. That night, I sat in my car for an hour after leaving his house, knuckles white around the steering wheel. I wasn't ready. He'd always been a constant firm, immovable, like bedrock. I couldn't imagine a world where I'd have to stand without him beneath me. But reality has a cruel way of showing up uninvited. His diagnosis came quiet and cold, congestive heart failure. Manageable, the doctor said. Treatable, maybe, but not curable. We'd bought time, not a future. From that day forward, every conversation felt heavier. Like we were speaking in chapters, not minutes. Like he was leaving breadcrumbs behind, and it was my job to follow them. He never said it outright, but I could feel it. He was preparing me for something bigger than grief. One night, just after his third hospital stay, I found him sitting alone on the back porch. The oxygen tank hissed quietly beside him, moonlight tracing the edge of his thinning hair. I sat beside him, the silence pressing like a second heartbeat. "Do you know why I always brought you to the store?" he asked suddenly. I nodded. "Because I paid attention." He smiled, small and tired. "No, because you listened. The others, they heard me, but you actually listened. There's a difference." He leaned back, eyes toward the sky. "I made mistakes with your mother. I gave in too often. Let her believe that love meant never saying no, but love does say no sometimes. Love sets boundaries. Love teaches." He turned to me, his eyes still sharp through the fog of fatigue. "That's what I never gave her, and I see now I didn't fail her by not giving enough. I failed her by not making her earn anything. I didn't know what to say." "What do you say to a man admitting he broke his own daughter with kindness?" "You turned out different," he said softly. "Not just smart, solid, like steel. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing." He never used the word inheritance. Never said I'm giving it all to you. But I knew, and it terrified me. Because love that deep comes with weight, with expectation, with the knowledge that someone believes in you so completely, they're willing to make you the final line between everything they built and the people who would burn it down. In his final months, he grew smaller, but sharper. He told me stories I'd never heard, about how Patricia forged his name on checks when she was 16, about the time she drained the savings account he set up for her college fund to buy a car, then totaled it 3 weeks later, about how she never said sorry, only asked for more. "I kept thinking she'd change," he whispered once. "I thought if I just gave her enough, she'd find her footing." He sighed, but I gave her a crutch instead, and she leaned on it until it broke. Our last real conversation came quietly. He was in bed, sun slipping through the curtains. I was reading through a vendor contract, pretending everything was normal. "Amber," he said, voice thinned to parchment. "You remember what I told you about holding the line?" I asked. He nodded. "It won't be easy, but it's the right thing. I need you to promise me whatever happens, you won't let them take this from you." "I promise," I whispered. He closed his eyes. A week later, he slipped into a coma. 3 days after that, surrounded by family who didn't understand what they'd already lost, Harold James Matthews took his final breath. The world didn't stop turning. But mine did. 2 weeks after the funeral, I found myself in a room that smelled like leather dust and consequence. Mr. Peterson's law office hadn't changed in decades. Wood-paneled walls, brass lamps, shelves lined with legal volumes no one had touched since dial-up internet. It felt like walking into a vault, one not just filled with paperwork, but with things people weren't supposed to hear. The room was full, but I'd never felt more alone. Patricia sat at the far end of the table, dressed like grief was a performance. Black lace, veil, oversized sunglasses despite the low light. On either side of her were Rachel and Jason, looking appropriately solemn. Craig stood behind them like a bodyguard who'd once been a failed bartender. I sat across from them alone. When Mr. Peterson cleared his throat, the air shifted. He began with the basics: small bequests, donations, tokens to distant cousins and longtime employees, a generous pension for Grandpa's housekeeper. Nothing controversial. Then his voice changed. And to my granddaughter, Amber Nicole Matthews, I didn't breathe. I leave the remainder of my estate, including all business holdings, investment portfolios, real estate properties, and personal effects. Time stopped. The silence that followed hit like a slap. Sharp, immediate, deafening. My mother ripped off her sunglasses. Her eyes were wild wet, not with grief, but fury. "This is a mistake," she said, voice cutting through the air like broken glass. Mr. Peterson didn't flinch. "There is no mistake, Mrs. Carter. Your father was very specific in his instructions." "That's impossible," she hissed. Her hand slammed the table, making Rachel jump. "I'm his daughter, his only child. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run. But more than anything, I wanted to scream. I didn't ask for this." She turned on me like a storm. "You knew, didn't you? You manipulated him while he was sick. Got in his head." Her words hit like cold water. "Mom, please," I whispered. "Not here. Don't you mom me," she snapped. "You tricked him." He was confused. He didn't know what he was doing. Across the table, Jason stared at his hands. Rachel wiped at her eyes, whether from real tears or performance I couldn't tell. Mr. Peterson's voice broke through again. Steady, measured, legal. Mr. Matthews updated his will 6 months ago. He was of sound mind. I have the evaluations to prove it. My mother laughed a sound, with no joy, only venom. 6 months ago, when he was already dying, that proves it. She got to him. The room dissolved into shouting, accusations, drama. Rachel sobbed. Craig mumbled something about family betrayal. Patricia called me a thief in every tone she could find, and I, still frozen, just sat there. The words were loud, but the feeling underneath them was louder. They weren't grieving Grandpa. They were grieving the money. Outside, the sun was shining. Inside, I was drowning. When the meeting finally ended, I stumbled into the parking lot, the folder of legal documents clutched to my chest like a shield. I made it to my car before the next blow came. Patricia cornered me, voice sugar-coated and sharp. "This is a simple fix," she said. "Transfer everything to me. I'll make sure everyone gets what they deserve." I stared at her. Her eyes, so similar to mine in color, were ice. Unforgiving, unapologetic. "I need time," I said. "There's nothing to think about. It's family money. It belongs to all of us." "No," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "It belongs to Grandpa, and this is what he wanted." Her expression hardened. "You have no idea what he wanted. I was his daughter for 52 years. You were just a distraction in his old age. That one hurt more than I expected. But I held my ground. I'm not making any decisions right now." She leaned in, voice low. "Don't be selfish, Amber. Jason needs college tuition. Rachel's drowning in debt. Craig and I are behind on the mortgage again." I blinked. "I thought you paid off the mortgage with the money Grandpa gave you last year." She waved the question away. "Things happen. Expenses come up, like the new Mercedes in their driveway." I didn't say it. I didn't have to. That night, alone in my apartment, I cried for hours. Not because I regretted inheriting what Grandpa left me, but because I knew deep in my bones that I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for the right to protect his legacy from his own daughter. I thought the storm had passed when I walked out of that office. I was wrong. That day wasn't the climax, it was the declaration of war. And the weapons weren't fists or lawsuits. They were subtler, sharper, more personal. My phone became a landmine. Text after text, call after call. At first, it was my mother voice syrup sweet 1 minute, venomous the next. We're family, Amber. Then you, ungrateful little girl. Rachel took to the family group chat like a performance stage. I just don't understand how you could be so cold, she wrote, complete with crying emojis and dramatic ellipses. Craig's voicemails were worse, slurred, threatening. Do the right thing, sweetheart, or things are gonna get ugly. I stopped answering. Then came the messages from extended family cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, aunts who'd forgotten my birthday a decade ago. They all wanted to understand my side, but their tone was clear. You're the villain in this story. Even people from my mother's church started reaching out. Women who used to bake me cookies, now quoting scripture about honoring one's parents and the sin of greed. It was a full-on campaign, coordinated, ruthless, and it was working. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I started dreading every notification. Every ding felt like another accusation. Why are you hurting your family? Why won't you just give it back? But the worst part, they knew exactly where to cut. Rachel sent me a photo once. It was my mom holding Jason as a baby. Me in the corner, maybe 7, holding his bottle. She gave everything to us, Rachel wrote. You're throwing that away for money. I stared at the image for a long time, trying to remember if that moment had felt as loving as it looked. It hadn't. I remember my mother screaming about Craig being late. I remember holding Jason not out of sisterly warmth, but because no one else would. Still, the guilt burrowed in like rot. Then the attacks escalated. Somehow, Patricia got the number to my office line. My boss, Barbara, called me in after the 3rd incident. Is everything okay at home? She asked gently. I told her the truth, just enough to explain the chaos, not enough to betray my shame. She nodded slowly. Take some personal days, and let reception know no more calls from your mother. I thanked her voice tight, then went to the bathroom and cried silently into my sleeve. That night, I made the mistake of checking my mother's Instagram. She had posted a photo of herself in front of a luxury car dealership, treating myself through the grief. #self-care. That same week, she had texted me, we're behind on utility bills. The water might get shut off. The manipulation was no longer subtle. It was artful, practiced, shameless. And yet a small part of me still ached, still asked, what if I really am the selfish one? Ethan, bless him, never let that part grow. He found me one night curled on the couch, lights off, phone clenched like a grenade. I told him everything. No more holding back. The will, the accusations, Craig's drunken threats, the recordings, the journal Grandpa kept. Everything. And when I finally whispered, maybe I should just give it to them just to make it stop, he didn't flinch. Amber, he said, voice low, steady. This isn't about money anymore. This is about control. Abuse. You're the firewall between your grandfather's legacy and the people trying to burn it down. I cried harder at that than I had at the funeral, because someone finally said it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war. The next day, I called Samantha, the estate lawyer Ethan had connected me with. A soft-spoken, sharp-eyed woman who reminded me of a scalpel, quiet but devastating when needed. She listened, asked the right questions, took meticulous notes. Her verdict: they're preparing to challenge the will. On what grounds? Undue influence, mental incapacity, the usual tactics. But Grandpa was clear-headed. I believe you, and the medical records will support that. But we need more. She told me to document everything, every voicemail, every text, every call. She explained the laws about recording in our state, one-party consent. Legal, admissible. I bought a second phone that week, used solely to collect evidence. I installed security cameras outside my apartment after spotting my mother's car parked nearby one night. She didn't knock, just sat there, watching. That night, I couldn't sleep, but I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I prayed, not for strength. I had that, but for clarity, for the resolve to see this through, to hold the line Grandpa had asked me to carry the burden he left me not because I wanted it, but because I was the only one who wouldn't sell it for a luxury car and a hashtag. Fear doesn't vanish. You don't outgrow it. You sharpen it, turn it into a tool. That's what Samantha taught me. From the moment she took my case, everything changed. Gone were the sleepless nights spent wondering, am I overreacting? Replaced by spreadsheets, strategies, and state statutes. We weren't just defending anymore, we were building a legal fortress brick by brick. Start with documentation, she said. Everything. Every voicemail, every text. Organize them by date. Label the emotional tone. Threats go in red. Red filled the screen fast. Craig's drunken voicemail. Rachel's guilt-laced monologues. Patricia's ice-cold voice asking for banking info and calling me unfit to manage a business in the same breath. I'd spent weeks trying to protect my family from the fallout. Now I was protecting myself from them. We reviewed Grandpa's medical records, confirmed the clean neurological evaluations dated just weeks before he revised the will. Perfect, Samantha said. That kills the mental incompetence angle. Still, something didn't sit right. A feeling in my gut like they weren't done. Like something bigger was coming. I was right. 3 weeks after the will reading, I received a text. No greeting, no punctuation. Just family meeting tomorrow at 3. Time to resolve this situation. Be there. No, please. No explanation. No address needed, it was obvious where. My childhood home. The same one they'd nearly lost twice to credit card debt and bad decisions. I stared at the screen, heart thudding. It felt like a summons, not an invitation. I showed Ethan over dinner. This isn't just another guilt trip, I whispered, pushing food around my plate. No, he agreed. It's an ambush. Samantha confirmed the same when I forwarded her the message. It's timed, she said. The 30-day period to contest the will is almost up. They may be trying to provoke you, get you to say or sign something under pressure. I nodded, numb. So what do I do? Don't go alone, Ethan said instantly. I'll come. But I shook my head. If I bring you, they'll say I'm hiding. This needs to be me, alone, on my feet. Then take me in your pocket, Samantha said. I'll be in the car parked down the street. If anything feels off, text me the word now. I'll walk in. We rehearsed responses, reviewed rights, practiced the breathing techniques she used in court when opposing counsel went for the jugular. Stay calm, she said. Let them show their desperation. The more pressure they apply, the more leverage they lose. That night, I sat alone in Grandpa's study. His house, my house now. The safe was still hidden behind the old photo of the first store. The combination, my birthday. He'd always said only someone who remembers what matters should have access to what I built. Inside the safe was more than I expected. Insurance policies, deeds, a leather-bound journal. I opened it with shaking hands. Each page was meticulous. Dates, dollar amounts, brief notes in Grandpa's sharp handwriting. March 12th, Patricia called. Needed $10,000 for home repairs. Craig just bought a new set of golf clubs. May 8th, Rachel allegedly needed dental surgery. Instagram says Cancun. October 3rd, gave $30,000 for Jason's testing. No receipts. Doubt it's legit. Each entry stung. Each one was a nail in the coffin of whatever fantasy I still clung to, that maybe this was just misunderstanding, not manipulation. The final entry nearly broke me. Gave Patricia $15,000 today. Jason's college fees. Doubt it. Too tired to argue. This is the last time. Arrangements are finalized. Amber will face challenges, but she has what Patricia never developed: strength of character. I pray I've made the right choice. I photographed everything, sent it to Samantha. Her response was instant. This is gold. Bring it with you, but don't reveal it unless absolutely necessary. The next morning, I got up early, packed the documents, chose my outfit carefully: professional, not flashy. Navy blazer, white blouse. A look that said, prepared, not aggressive. Ethan walked me to the car, kissed my forehead. You don't need luck, he said. You have something better. He was right. I had the truth, and I had my grandfather's trust sealed in ink and ledger and years of earned belief. As I drove to the house where everything began, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not fear, not dread. Resolve. Let them come for me. Let them try. I was done shrinking. The sun that day was too bright. Like the universe hadn't gotten the memo this wasn't a reunion. It was a battleground. And I wasn't coming home. I was walking into a trap I could smell from a mile away. I arrived at 2:59 p.m. My mother's house looked exactly as I remembered, except for the drawn curtains. That had never been her style. Patricia lived for appearances, which meant today wasn't about theater. It was about pressure. I took a breath, picked up my leather portfolio, and walked to the door. It opened before I could knock. There she was. Perfect hair. Too perfect smile. Amber. Right on time. Her tone was sweet. Poison dipped in honey. Everyone's waiting in the living room. I stepped inside and knew this wasn't a meeting. It was an ambush. Rachel and Jason sat on the couch like hostages in their own home. Craig loomed by the fireplace, arms crossed, and in the two chairs usually reserved for holiday guests sat two men in expensive suits. My mother's grin widened. Amber, meet Mr. Wilson and Mr. Daniels. They're helping us sort things out. No handshake was offered. No introduction necessary. I knew exactly who they were. Hired pressure, not lawyers' advisors. The kind that specialize in redistributing assets under the illusion of fairness. Please sit, my mother purred, gesturing to a single straight-backed chair facing them all. Like an interrogation. I sat, calm, composed, my portfolio on my lap like a shield. No coffee? I asked, voice flat. She blinked. Let's just get to it, I added. Mr. Wilson leaned forward. Amber, your family is concerned. Managing a large estate can be overwhelming. I've been in financial analysis for 7 years, I said. I think I'll manage. My mother cut in. This isn't about your job. It's about family. Unity. Your grandfather would have wanted all of us to benefit. Then he would have written his will differently, I replied. Rachel's voice trembled, her community theater voice. He wasn't thinking clearly. The medication, the pain. He wasn't himself. He was lucid until the final week, I said coldly. The will was updated 6 months before that. Mr. Daniels opened his briefcase. We've prepared a solution, one that honors your grandfather while restoring harmony. My mother beamed. You'll still get a generous portion, of course. Mr. Wilson slid a document across the coffee table. You'd transfer the business holdings and investment accounts to your mother, the most experienced family member. And the real estate, I asked. Liquidated, proceeds divided among family members. How generous, I murmured. Craig stepped forward. Look, Amber, we can do this the easy way or what, I said sharply. Silence. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat. We also have paperwork prepared to contest the will on the grounds of undue influence. I almost laughed. You're saying I manipulated a dying man into giving me everything he was elderly, vulnerable? You spent an unusual amount of time alone with him. I stared at him. So being present is now a crime? My mother leaned in. No one wants court, Amber. Think what that would do to his reputation. Public records, depositions. That hit me, because she wasn't wrong. Grandpa hated mess, hated spectacle. Would he want his mental capacity questioned in court? The doubt flashed briefly. And that's when I knew. She saw it. She leaned back victorious. "We're just asking you to do the right thing." Mr. Wilson handed me a pen. "Sign this, and it's done." I picked up the papers, flipped through them slowly. It wasn't a fair agreement. It was a total surrender. Every asset, every share, every decision. In exchange, vague promises and a generous slice of what was already mine. I looked up, 5 pairs of eyes watching me, waiting. My mother smiled. I smiled back, but not the way she remembered. Not the smile of a girl desperate to keep the peace. This was Grandpa's smile. Cold, quiet, certain. "Before I sign anything, I said I have a question." My mother's eyes narrowed. When exactly did you put a deposit down on the house in Naples?" She froze. "What are you talking about?" "Craig mentioned it," I said. 6 months ago, when Grandpa's doctor gave you his timeline." Rachel turned to Craig, furious. "I never said that," he muttered. "I recorded the call," I said. Silence, and I've documented every threat, every guilt trip, every Instagram shopping spree during supposed financial hardship. Mr. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Matthews, I'm not done." I opened my portfolio, pulled out Grandpa's journal. January 15th. Patricia requested $30,000 for Jason's medical expenses. Jason wasn't sick. The money went to a cruise, posted on her Instagram. "Best birthday gift ever, our blessed." Rachel turned pale. May 8th. I continued. Rachel's emergency dental surgery. But she was in Cancun that weekend. More pages, more receipts, every lie, every siphoned dollar, all of it in ink. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat. "This is a lot." My mother stood, shaking. "You ungrateful little—" "This meeting is over," I said calmly. I gathered my documents. "Unless you want to meet my actual lawyer who's waiting outside." Mr. Wilson stood abruptly. "Mrs. Carter, you didn't mention existing counsel." "There isn't any," she snapped. "Yet," I added. Patricia hissed. "This isn't over." "Actually," I said, walking to the door, "it is." Jason stood suddenly. "I'm going with her." Everyone froze. My mother's voice turned sharp. "Sit down." But he didn't. He crossed the room, stood beside me, shaking but steady. "She's not the one who lied. You are." Craig took a step forward. I raised my phone. "This conversation is being recorded." That stopped him. I opened the door. Jason followed. As it slammed shut behind us, I felt something unexpected. Not fear, not guilt. Freedom. We didn't say a word until we reached the car. Jason sat in the passenger seat, eyes locked on the dashboard, hands clenched in his lap. His shoulders were stiff, like he was holding in more than just silence, like he was trying to stop himself from shattering completely. I started the engine, but didn't pull away. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, then shook his head. "I don't know." We sat there, the car idling, the weight of what had just happened pressing down like gravity. "I didn't know," he said, finally, voice low. "I swear, Amber, I didn't know about the money, about the lies, about what they were trying to pull." I believed him because I saw it in his face, the way he looked at our mother when the documents came out. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the slow unraveling of everything he thought he could trust. "I thought you were being selfish," he admitted. "I thought, I don't know, that maybe you really had manipulated Grandpa. You weren't the only one," I said softly. He turned to me then, really looked at me. I just wanted to believe she was telling the truth. I nodded. "I know the feeling." His voice broke. "But she lied to me. She used me. Said I needed college money to get people to feel bad for her. Said it was family money and that you were hoarding it. He laughed bitterly. I asked her once if she'd talk to you. She told me Amber's always been different, cold, too good for the rest of us. My chest tightened because I remembered that line. Not those exact words, but the tone. That biting dismissal of anything I tried to do that wasn't about her. That wasn't for her. You're not the only one she talks about like that, I said. He looked down at his hands. Where do I even go now? You come with me, I said without hesitation. He blinked. Seriously? There's a pull-out couch with your name on it, and probably some frozen pizza I forgot about. His laugh was small. Tired. Real. Thank you. I smiled. You made the right call, Jason. That took guts. He nodded, wiping at his eyes quickly like he didn't want me to see. I didn't want to be part of that anymore. We pulled away from the house, his house, my old house, our mother's stage, and didn't look back. 20 minutes later, we were at a quiet cafe. Samantha was already there, seated in a back corner tablet, out coffee in hand. When she saw Jason beside me, she raised an eyebrow. This is my brother, I said simply. He's with me now. She extended a hand. Samantha Reed, Amber's attorney? Jason shook it, hesitant. You're real, I get that a lot, she smiled. He sat still, stunned, still processing. She lost it, he said, staring at his untouched coffee. When we walked out, screamed that I was disloyal, said I'd regret this. She's trying to hold on to control, Samantha said gently. It's what people do when they feel it slipping. She said, I'd better not come back, Jason muttered. That I was choosing you over her. You didn't choose sides, I said. You chose truth. Samantha leaned in. Jason, did your mother ever talk to you about the inheritance before your grandfather passed? He nodded slowly. She said she'd already made plans, that once she had control, everything would get easier. She talked about buying a house in Naples, joining a country club, renovating the house. And your college? I asked. He laughed without humor. She said I'd figure it out, that I was smart enough to get scholarships. My throat tightened. She never planned to help you, I said quietly. I know that now, he replied. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of all the years between us finally finding a place to land. Then Jason looked up, eyes clearer than I'd seen in a long time. What happens now? I looked at Samantha. She smiled faintly. Now, I said, we protect what Grandpa built. Together. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was holding the world alone. I had someone standing beside me. Not out of obligation, but out of choice, out of truth. Healing doesn't come with trumpets. It doesn't arrive in grand gestures or neatly wrapped apologies. It comes in silence, in small decisions, in the way you choose every day not to let bitterness win. Jason moved into my apartment that same night. No ceremony. Just a duffel bag, a pizza, and an unspoken relief that he didn't have to go back. He crashed on the pull-out couch and slept for nearly 14 hours. I let him. When he woke, we didn't talk about Mom. We talked about Grandpa, about the way he always smelled like sawdust and coffee. How he'd let Jason help at the store by restacking shelves that didn't need restacking. How he once made Jason believe a new pencil case was a reward for excellent operational strategy. Jason laughed through his cereal. I was 8. Thought I was a genius. You still might be, I said. Over the next few weeks, life slowly shifted. I took a leave from my corporate job. The hardware stores needed attention. The managers were competent, but the edge was missing. Grandpa had been the compass. Now they needed a new one, and for better or worse, that was me. Jason tagged along when he could, at first just to escape the apartment. But then something clicked. He started asking questions about profit margins, about inventory patterns, about why one store was doing better than another, despite having the same foot traffic. "You've got the gene," I told him one day. He shrugged. "I just remember things Grandpa said." That's when I asked the question, "What are you planning to study?" He hesitated. "Business, with a focus on sustainability." That stopped me cold. "Really?" He nodded sheepish. "Grandpa used to talk about eco-friendly supply chains, said it was the future. I didn't get it then, but now it makes sense." In that moment, I saw it clearly. Not just a business legacy, but a continuation of something bigger. Not in Patricia, not in Rachel, but in Jason. "You want to learn the ropes?" I asked. His eyes lit up. "You serious?" I smiled. "Grandpa didn't hand me the business, he taught me. I'm going to do the same for you." We began rebuilding, not just shelves or ledgers, but intention. We restructured operations, launched a new eco-focused division, opened a green building showroom. Customers loved it. Employees felt proud. It wasn't just Grandpa's legacy anymore, it was ours. In the background, Patricia simmered. Voicemails turned into silence, then into vague social media jabs, then nothing. I didn't expect reconciliation, but Rachel surprised me. She texted one night, "Can we talk, just us?" We met at a neutral cafe. She looked thinner, less polished, but more real. "I was wrong," she said before even sitting down. "I believed Mom. I wanted to. But after what I saw, I can't unsee it. She didn't ask for money. She asked for forgiveness. And somehow, I found I had it." We agreed to keep things private. Rachel wasn't ready to face Mom's wrath, but she was volunteering now, considering going back to school. For the first time, she was building something of her own. That mattered more than any inheritance ever could. With Samantha's help, I established 3 trusts. One for Jason's education and transition into the company. One for Rachel, modest, conditional, but there. And one for Mom, structured, controlled. Enough to live, but not enough to destroy. The rest went to a foundation in Grandpa's name, focused on mentoring young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The kind of kids who, like me, once just needed someone to see them. 6 months after Grandpa's passing, I finally moved into his house. It felt different. Not like stepping into someone else's memory, but like claiming something I'd helped build. We hung his portrait in the study Jason and I shared. His eyes seemed to follow us as we worked, approving, watching, proud. Healing didn't happen overnight, but it happened. And some nights when the lights are low and the house is quiet, I swear I can still hear his voice. "Nothing worth having comes easy, kiddo." And now, I finally understand what he meant. It's easy to think inheritance is about money. It's not. Money runs out, houses crumble, businesses change hands. But what stays the part they can't take from you is the weight of someone's belief. The responsibility of being trusted when no one else was. My grandfather didn't just leave me an estate. He left me a question. What will you do with it? Not the money, the strength, the grit, the refusal to fold under pressure, the ability to say no to family, to fear, to guilt, disguised as love. He didn't hand me security. He handed me a legacy and dared me to earn it. And in that, he gave me everything. There are still days I miss him so fiercely, it steals the air from my lungs. When I walk through the hardware store and catch the scent of sawdust and motor oil, it's like I'm 13 again, watching him close a deal with nothing but a nod and a half smile. I still hear his voice sometimes when I'm reviewing quarterly numbers or when I see Jason solve a supplier dispute without raising his voice. "That's my girl," I imagine him saying, not because I followed his path perfectly, but because I made it matter. Rachel's going back to school. Jason is set to take on a full-time role next year. And Mom, well, some relationships don't get healed. They just get quieter. She came to the grand opening of our newest store. Didn't say a word. Didn't stay long. But she stood in the back during my speech, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Then she left. That was enough. Because the truth is, some people grow, others calcify. And part of honoring a legacy is knowing when to stop bleeding for people who only know how to cut. Ethan and I got engaged last month. He proposed in the break room of the flagship store because this place raised you, he said. And maybe he was right. Maybe the aisles and shelves and ledgers shaped me as much as any parent ever could. I wear the ring like I carry the business with reverence and resolve. And late at night, when the house is still, I reread Grandpa's journal. There's a note I missed the first time, scrawled in the margin of his final entry, nearly hidden beneath a paperclip. The true measure of wealth isn't what you have, but what you build from it. Make it matter, Amber. And I am, not just for him, but for every girl who grew up invisible in her own house, who learned to read silence like a second language. For every person who had to become the adult too early. For every heir not chosen out of favoritism, but out of necessity. Because they were the only one who could carry it. If you're reading this and you're fighting your own battle with family, with fear, with the weight of someone else's chaos, know this: you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to bleed just because someone else calls it love. And legacy. It isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in what you choose to build, when no one else will. So build, even if it hurts, even if you do it alone at first, because one day, someone will walk through what you've built and feel seen, protected, empowered. And maybe then, like I do now, you'll finally understand that was the real inheritance all along. Just when I thought I had a better life, something worse happened. I threw the file on the table, my heart pounding. "It's all here, Patricia. The accounts, the lies." But she just laughed contemptuously. "Cute. You think you're naked?" I completely cut her off, but she leaned forward, her voice low, as if she were whispering a secret. "You think I let that guy go without a plan?" I was stunned. "Your little lawyer, I met her 3 months ago. The contract your grandfather signed, I sent it to you in advance." The room was crowded. Patricia looked at me like I was a pawn on her chessboard. "You think you're chosen, but you're just a guard." Thanks for reading. Comment number 1 below if you're ready for my next story. No to family, to fear, to guilt, disguised as love. He didn't hand me security. He handed me a legacy and dared me to earn it. And in that, he gave me everything. There are still days I miss him so fiercely, it steals the air from my lungs. When I walk through the hardware store and catch the scent of sawdust and motor oil, it's like I'm 13 again, watching him close a deal with nothing but a nod and a half smile. I still hear his voice sometimes when I'm reviewing quarterly numbers, or when I see Jason solve a supplier dispute without raising his voice. "That's my girl," I imagine him saying, not because I followed his path perfectly, but because I made it matter. Rachel's going back to school. Jason is set to take on a full-time role next year. And Mom, well, some relationships don't get healed. They just get quieter. She came to the grand opening of our newest store. Didn't say a word. Didn't stay long. But she stood in the back during my speech, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Then she left. That was enough. Because the truth is, some people grow, others calcify. And part of honoring a legacy is knowing when to stop bleeding for people who only know how to cut. Ethan and I got engaged last month. He proposed in the break room of the flagship store because this place raised you, he said. And maybe he was right. Maybe the aisles and shelves and ledgers shaped me as much as any parent ever could. I wear the ring like I carry the business with reverence and resolve. And late at night, when the house is still, I reread Grandpa's journal. There's a note I missed the first time, scrawled in the margin of his final entry, nearly hidden beneath a paperclip. The true measure of wealth isn't what you have, but what you build from it. Make it matter, Amber. And I am, not just for him, but for every girl who grew up invisible in her own house, who learned to read silence like a second language. For every person who had to become the adult too early. For every heir not chosen out of favoritism, but out of necessity. Because they were the only one who could carry it. If you're reading this and you're fighting your own battle with family, with fear, with the weight of someone else's chaos, know this: you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to bleed just because someone else calls it love. And legacy. It isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in what you choose to build, when no one else will. So build, even if it hurts, even if you do it alone at first. Because one day, someone will walk through what you've built and feel seen, protected, empowered. And maybe then, like I do now, you'll finally understand that was the real inheritance all along. Just when I thought I had a better life, something worse happened. I threw the file on the table, my heart pounding. It's all here, Patricia. The accounts, the lies. But she just laughed contemptuously. Cute. You think you're naked? I completely cut her off, but she leaned forward, her voice low, as if she were whispering a secret. You think I let that guy go without a plan? I was stunned. Your little lawyer, I met her 3 months ago. The contract your grandfather signed, I sent it to you in advance. The room was crowded. Patricia looked at me like I was a pawn on her chessboard. You think you're chosen, but you're just a guard. Thanks for reading. Comment number 1 below if you're ready for my next story.